What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and I have another interesting video for y'all to check out from me. Today, what I want to talk to y'all about is an unpopular opinion that I think a lot of people are probably going to tilt their head when I say this, but that I have. Don't have a problem with movies, television shows, etc., anything that you watch that have an all-white cast, that don't have any quote-unquote diversity and explicitly don't have any black people. And I'm going to tell you why. A lot of people, our people, black people I'm talking about, have this issue with not really understanding or discerning the difference between black representation and black ownership. Those are two very explicit things, two very explicitly different things, that is. And the issue is a lot of our people are hoping for representation, or the simple idea of representation. And what happens a lot of times is that idea of representation, which is just seeing a black face being represented, ends up turning into tokenism, a bunch of strange tropes, and a bunch of things that we really aren't asking white people when they're actually representing us to actually do. And the reason why that's an issue is because we have to understand how white supremacy works. We have to understand how everything in our society actually just works in general. It's dominated by white supremacy. So what that means is that they control the media, they control production studios, they control the stuff that's being put out. So they ultimately are the people who you're asking to have these things done. So what you're really doing is you're asking them to represent you and to put you in a light that is positive or that you think is cool. And the reality is that they're not really looking to represent you the way that you want to be represented. What a lot of these white media companies and producers are doing is they're trying to meet a diversity checkbox. So what they basically try to do is they represent a black person, and what it does is it alleviates them or absolves them from being called racist because they showed some form of representation or diversity that shows that they want to have black people, or as a lot of people like to say, people of freaking color in these white spaces. So a lot of times what they try to do is they try to represent a black person in these shows or in these movies because of the fact that they know that they're meeting a diversity quota. Everybody who is watching them, including their audience, is going to see that they're not racist, or is going to at least perceive them as not racist because they've actually put a black person on screen. So what it does is it gives this facade of progression. And then what a lot of people perceive that as is it's a world where things are changing, things are getting better, when in reality they're just getting more covert. The racism that we would see that was blatant, or the ignorance of not representing black people, although they clearly exist and they clearly are walking around and flourishing despite everything that's been done to them. What they're basically doing is they're making it more covert, where a lot of these disrespectful images and messages and things that they're trying to put out there are actually hidden. So that's when you have a character who's black and they're put on to these different on these shows, and then they have something strange trope wise attached to them, like they're either a nerd who is not relatable, or they really don't act from a cultural standpoint in the way that a black person generally would act. So they come off almost like a white person who was just painted black. You have characters that are race swapped. So that kind of goes back to what I had just said. You have these characters who are just throwaways. They're treated like they're basically nothing, like almost like martyrs. They're killed off. They're shown as insignificant. You have all these different types of tropes that are used for black people. And they're actually things that show up a lot of times in modern times. So the reason why I said that I don't really have a problem with not having any black characters on a show that is supposed to be white or mostly white, or a movie that's supposed to be mostly white, is because of the fact that I rather their people tell the truth about how they are versus for them to lie about how we are while profiting and benefiting from the idea that they showed our image and they showed our face. And they do all this without having to really do anything tangible for the black people whose faces that they're actually using. So it's, in other words, presenting black faces in certain places, not black ownership. Now, let me tell you the difference. Black ownership is where black people control their own things. They control their own products. They have their own movies. They have their own television shows. They have their own content, whether it's animated, whether it's live action. We control those things. We don't have white influence. We don't have white people also telling us what, even standing alongside us, telling us what decisions we should and should not make, or even having any type of input whatsoever. These are things that black people would control solely. And this is something that is desperately needed for black people, especially foundational black Americans. So I'm saying all this to basically say the difference between the two is the amount of control that a black person actually has in these types of scenarios and the manipulation that could be involved. Now, here's another layer to consider too. Not only do you want black autonomy or ownership, whatever you want to call it, you also want black people who are codified, who have autonomy or ownership, so they are not repeating the same negative tropes and ideals that you see in a lot of white media that shows these unrelatable, disrespectful, etc. images of black people. So essentially, the reason why I say I'm okay with an all-white cast is because I'm cool with them just watching them do destructive things and talk about their own people instead of just putting us in there for their own benefit. Because the reality is that the days of them profiting off of our image and also benefiting in a way where people don't want to call them racist or call them out as being racist, those days are over. And us as black people, we need to come together so we're not allowing that stuff to go on. Anyway, y'all, I hope y'all enjoyed today's episode. I'll have more for y'all in the next coming weeks. Make sure y'all hit the subscribe button. Make sure y'all follow me at Kukolas. I'll talk to y'all later, and I hope y'all have a good rest of y'all's night, day, or whatever time it is where you're at. Peace.